The following video was made possible by Fayette County Public Schools through the Kentucky Aware Grant. Kids come to school to learn, but there are so many things going on in their lives outside of these four walls that impact their ability to learn and be successful in the classroom.
In fact, one of the largest studies ever done, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, looked at how adversity in childhood can have negative lasting effects on a child. The study found that not only does adversity impact a child's lifelong health and well-being, but adverse childhood experiences have been linked to high-risk behaviors, which lead to physical and mental health illnesses and altered life potential. Further, this study shows that the more adverse events a child experiences, the greater their risk for negative outcomes. I am Susan Knoll, and this is my colleague, Adrienne O'Rourke.
And we are with the University of Kentucky Center on Trauma in Children. And today we want to talk to you about one type of adversity that a child can experience, trauma, and how it might be impacting your child or a child you know. Our goal today is to help you understand what trauma is and the importance of addressing trauma so children can reach their full potential. You may be asking, what makes something a traumatic event? A traumatic event is an experience that can involve actual or threatened death, injury, or sexual violation that might happen directly to someone, or it could also be the witnessing of that event. So, for example, seeing violence between people a child loves, especially if it's someone who is supposed to protect and care for the child. Some specific examples of a traumatic event are a car accident, community violence, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, a neglect experience, or a natural disaster. But it's not just the experience, it is the child's perception of danger, threat, and harm plus the experience that dictates whether or not the event is traumatic. And remember, the child's perception of threat or safety may be different than ours. How is a traumatic event different than just regular stress? Stress is a concept that most of us are familiar with and have firsthand experience dealing with. On one hand, there is healthy, helping stress. This is the type of stress that motivates you to get to work on time or to prepare for a presentation. It essentially helps us function better. Then, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, there are stressful experiences, like getting stuck in traffic when you're late to work. This may make us feel bad and anxious for a bit, but it ultimately goes away when the stressor is gone. That doesn't happen with traumatic stress, which causes ongoing distress in profound ways. One key factor to traumatic stress is that it is more than the child can process and cope with in the moment. It can produce feelings of terror, powerlessness, and out-of-control physiological reactions like sweating, shaking, and fast heart rate. It's a physical response. There are three different types of trauma I want you to be familiar with. The first is acute trauma, which is from a single incident that lasts a limited period of time, so there is a beginning, middle, and end. An example of an acute trauma would be a car accident or a physical fight on the playground. This is different than chronic trauma. Chronic trauma is a repeated exposure to traumatic events over time. An example of this would be a child who is repeatedly exposed to domestic violence and/or is being physically abused over time. Sometimes, children can adapt in the moment, and with or without treatment, their reactions might seem to be better, but another exposure or trigger can activate the symptoms again. The last type of traumatic stress is complex trauma, and this refers to multiple traumatic exposures caused by caregivers or trusted others. With complex trauma, the trauma exposure changes the way people think and feel about themselves and the world. For instance, they might start to think, "I'm not worthy," or "something is wrong with me," or "people will always treat me badly." It changes their view of the world. We've talked about different types of trauma. Let's talk about when traumatic stress becomes a disorder. Traumatic stress isn't automatically a disorder. It only becomes one if the symptoms last over time. Post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD, occurs when a person displays severe traumatic stress reactions. These reactions last for a long time, and they get in the way of living a normal life. That being said, it is important to remember that PTSD does not develop in everyone or after every trauma exposure. For instance, if we are all exposed to the same traumatic event, we would have a range of responses. Some people would be distressed for a short period of time, whereas for others, it may be longer. The reason for this is that the nature of trauma experiences vary, and we all carry with us different risk factors and experiences which affect the way we react. The important thing to remember is that just because a child is exposed to a traumatic event does not mean they will develop PTSD. What is PTSD? There are 4 different symptom categories that I want you to be familiar with. The first symptom cluster is intrusion. This includes images, sensations, or memories of the traumatic event that intrude on us when we don't want them there. So, for example, the child is trying to focus in class, trying to fall asleep, trying to do what her caregiver is asking her to do, but is being bombarded with these disturbing thoughts, flashbacks, and nightmares. These images are very mentally and emotionally distressing for children. The second symptom cluster is avoidance, and this is when a child tries to avoid internal reminders, like thoughts and feelings, or to avoid external reminders of what happened, like activities or situations that trigger recall of the trauma. This is problematic because it interferes with children resolving their symptoms and returning to their normal functioning. Kids might also experience what we call alterations in arousal and reactivity. I want to use an example to help you understand what this might look like in a child. The other night, I was watching a TV series about a detective who solves murder mysteries, and I was in the middle of an episode when I heard a loud crash coming from the kitchen. I immediately felt my heart start racing, I started breathing really quickly, and I felt shaky and sick to my stomach. Once I plucked up the courage to investigate, it turned out I had stacked too many dishes on my drying rack and one fell off. Once I realized everything was fine, I started to relax and that adrenaline rush began to wear off. But I don't have a trauma history. If I did, this experience might have activated the thoughts and feelings associated with the traumatic event and might not have gone away so quickly. That feeling that I had when I thought there was danger was not pleasant. In fact, it felt really awful. Maybe this is an experience you've also had. Imagine if that panic feeling didn't go away and lasted for a long time. How would that make you feel? It would likely make you irritable and difficult to be around. There is also something called dissociation. This is basically a reaction to a trauma exposure that is so overwhelming that the child checks out, feels numb, or feels as if they are in a dream. It's their way of separating themselves from the experience. And last but not least, the 4th set of symptoms are negative changes in thoughts and mood. Kids with these symptoms may have difficulty experiencing positive emotions, may show decreased participation in activities they once enjoyed, and may be unable to remember parts of the traumatic event. So you may be thinking, why do some children develop PTSD and others don't? Well, it's important to remember that children's reaction to trauma will vary depending on a few factors, including their age, gender and developmental stage, their temperament or disposition, how they perceive the event, their history of trauma, how safe their current environment is, and if they have adults around who can offer help and protection. Even after the traumatic experience is over, kids can encounter trauma reminders. Trauma reminders are triggers, events, situations, places, and people that, whether conscious or unconscious, remind a child of the traumatic event. I want to give you a few short examples to help illustrate this point. A child who has witnessed community violence may hear a car in their neighborhood backfire and be reminded of a gunshot. Or a child who is involved in a physical fight on the playground at school might have a flashback of the fight when she sees the slide she was standing next to at the time. Her body might automatically respond to seeing the slide even though there is no current threat. For example, her heart rate might increase, she might feel panicked and shaky. Essentially, even non-threatening events, and these can be people or places or things, can be trauma reminders for children and cause a similar response to what they felt during the actual traumatic event. Just as traumatic experiences can have a negative impact on our thoughts and beliefs, Imagine the power of a consistent, nurturing, and positive relationship for children. Research tells us that there are things we can do to help children heal and recover. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to my coworker Susan for more information on recovery and treatment.
Thank you, Adrienne. My message today is that there is hope. Children can and do recover from traumatic events. When we see children struggling with their thoughts and feelings, it's natural to become discouraged or worried that they will never recover. We all carry around thoughts and feelings from our life experiences, and as Adrienne has mentioned, children who have been traumatized may have negative thoughts and feelings about themselves and their world. As caregivers, you can be a major agent of change and source of healing for your child as you help them develop positive and healthy thoughts and feelings about themselves. So what can you do? The National Child Traumatic Stress Network recommends the following when you are concerned about your child's responses and reactions to trauma. First, be patient. We all respond to adversities and heal at different rates. There is no correct timetable for healing. Try not to push your child to get over it. You want to take your child's reactions seriously. Try not to say, "It wasn't so bad," or think, "If we don't make a big deal, they will forget all about it." Instead, say, "I know it feels really bad right now, but we are going to help you feel better." Explain to your child that they are not responsible for what happened. Children often blame themselves for events, even when it was completely out of their control. You want to assure your child that they are safe. Give direct safety messages such as, "I will do everything in my power to make sure you are safe in this home." Take direct action to ensure their safety at home, school, and in the community. For example, you might want to install an alarm system at home and teach them how to operate it. It's important to maintain regular home and school routines to support the process of recovery. Routines help to provide a sense of security and predictability, which helps to decrease stress or anxiety. It's also important to learn about common reactions that children have to traumatic events, just as Adrienne has talked about. You also need to take time to think about your own experiences with trauma. Your own trauma history and your feelings about your child's trauma event will influence how you react. If you need to talk to someone about this, talk to a trauma specialist. If your child's distress continues for more than 4 weeks, you should seek help from a qualified mental health professional. The school counselor and your child's primary health care provider can help you with resources. As a general rule, if your child's reactions such as nightmares, recurrent thoughts, fears, and/or negative emotions or behaviors are worse instead of better, are interfering with your child's daily activities or school performance, or your family is having trouble meeting your child's needs, you should seek a qualified mental health professional that specializes in trauma therapy for children. The mental health professional you choose should have experience in assessing and treating child traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. A trauma-informed mental health professional understands the role that adverse events play in the lives of children and how trauma exposure affects them in every aspect of their lives, developmentally, academically, socially, psychologically, physiologically, and in their family. Trauma-informed mental health providers help children process their trauma through understanding what they think, how they feel, and their actions. Your school has mental health professionals available for consult and intervention that have had specific trauma training. When seeking help for your child, you will want to find a mental health provider who uses evidence-based practices. That is, treatments proven to help you and your child feel safe, learn about trauma and its effects, cope with difficulties caused by trauma, recognize and build on strengths, and talk about ways to get back on track. To assess and evaluate the child's needs and progress in treatment, the mental health provider should talk with you and your child and use standardized paper and pen measures. Once they have the results of the assessment, the provider should recommend a trauma-informed, evidence-based practice. Here are some examples of interventions available in your community. trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools, and child and family traumatic stress intervention.
Thank you for joining us today. The more you learn about how traumatic events affect children, the more you will understand the reasons for your child's behaviors and emotions, and the better prepared you will be to help them cope and recover.
Remember, you play an important role in your child's recovery and healing from traumatic experiences. When children know that you and other caring adults are trying to keep them safe and that there are people who can help them with what they are feeling, most children can recover and go on to live healthy and productive lives. Look at the links below in the video notes to learn more and access services for you and your child. Also, be sure to check out the links to our other videos in this series.